Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. Today we are going to be diving deep, no pun intended, into a real doozy.
Yeah.
We're talking about President Trump's April 2025 announcement of some
Some significant new tariffs.
new tariffs. Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah.
Pretty major global shift,
It's
right?
huge. Yeah.
So we've got a lot of,
Analysis?
we've been sifting through all the analysis, and really our goal is to kind of see what happened.
Yeah. The immediate reaction.
Yeah, like how are these trade moves, these tariffs, how are they impacting the world right now?
Right.
And we're going to be focusing a bit on the global economy
Yeah.
and especially the whole situation in Ukraine.
I mean, there are a lot of interconnected pieces to this story.
Oh, absolutely.
But what's really striking is how fast everybody reacted.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, across the board, different sectors, different regions.
It was like dominoes, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
So let's rewind back to the beginning, to the actual announcement itself. This wasn't just like some idea he was floating. This landed with some serious legal weight behind it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
April 2nd, 2025. Am I right?
Yes, you're exactly right. April 2nd. And the real key here is the invocation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
Okay, so what is that for folks who might not?
Right. So it's from 1977, and basically it gives the president a lot of power
Okay.
to control trade during a national emergency. Now, this is important because it basically lets him do these tariffs,
Right.
with a lot of force.
Okay.
And it might even let him skip some of the usual legislative processes.
So it's a powerful tool.
It is.
So what was the reason? I mean, what was he saying
Right.
about why these tariffs are needed?
Well, he was talking about persistent trade deficits, of course, the U.S. buying more from other countries than it sells.
Right.
Then there's the issue of unfair tariffs from other countries.
Heck.
And the argument that foreign VA systems are hurting U.S. manufacturing.
Okay, so those are the things he was citing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we should mention VAT is
Value-added tax.
value-added tax,
Yeah.
which is a common consumption tax in many countries, but not in the U.S.
Right.
So it can create, some complexities in international trade.
Got it. But these weren't small tweaks, these tariffs, right?
No, not at all.
I mean, this was a 10% across-the-board tariff on almost every import coming into the U.S.
Almost everything.
And then there were additional tariffs on top of that
Right.
for countries that have big trade surpluses with us, with America.
Exactly.
So we're talking about, you mentioned them before, like the EU,
Sure.
China, Japan, South Korea.
Yep, big players.
I mean, they're getting hit with up to 30% tariffs on top of that baseline 10.
That's where the real pressure is, right?
Yeah, it seems like a pretty clear message about wanting to reshape the whole trade landscape.
It does.
No, there were some exceptions, right?
Yes, that's right. Pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, energy, and certain strategic materials.
They got a pass?
What do you think that tells us about what the administration is really worried about? Or maybe trying to protect?
Well, it seems like they're being strategic, right? Trying to shield key domestic industries, maybe limit any backlash in areas that could become political headaches.
It's like they're picking and choosing their battles.
Precisely.
And of course, the whole message, the whole framing of this was very much America first again.
Yeah, absolutely. That resonated.
How much do you think that sort of framing is influencing the way the rest of the world is reacting to these tariffs?
Well, it certainly emphasizes that the U.S. is putting its own economic interests first.
Right.
And that naturally makes other countries think about their own interests. And maybe, retaliatory measures.
Yeah.
It creates this atmosphere of economic nationalism, which makes it harder to work together globally.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that framing has definitely played a role in the global response.
So the announcement happens, boom. What's next? Markets, right?
Yeah.
How did the markets react?
Oh, it was instant. And I don't just mean big. I mean really, really big.
Like, give me the rundown, paint the picture.
Okay, so major stock markets all over the world, they tanked.
Tanked.
Like immediately.
Yeah.
The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, they were in bear market territory within days.
Bear market territory.
That means a drop of 20% or more from a recent peak. It's a sign that investors are spooked, they're pessimistic, they're worried about an economic slowdown.
And why so fast? Why were they in bear market territory within days?
Well, a lot of trading these days is done by algorithms, right?
Right.
Computers making decisions in fractions of a second.
Right.
So when you have this kind of policy uncertainty, these algorithms just go into sell-off mode all at once.
Wow.
And then you have the big institutional investors like pension funds and things like that reassessing their risks.
So it's like a chain reaction, basically.
Exactly.
So bear market in days, that's bad, but what about actual money? What are we talking about here?
Over $9.5 trillion in
Wow.
global equity value, just gone, evaporated.
Gone in 3 days.
In 3 days, yeah, it's a staggering amount.
That's insane.
And it wasn't just the U.S., it was global. The FTSE 100 in London dropped. Asian markets took a hit as well. The Nikkei in Japan was down almost 9%.
Wow.
The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong shed 8%.
So this is a worldwide shockwave, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Companies that operate globally, companies with those complex supply chains, they're suddenly facing a whole new level of uncertainty.
Like, who are we talking about? What kind of companies?
Think about Apple, Tesla, Boeing. They rely on parts and manufacturing from all over the world.
Right.
Suddenly, their carefully planned operations are hit with this new layer of economic friction.
Yeah, it's like throwing sand in the gears.
Exactly.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Europe, because it seems like the EU was directly in the line of fire with these tariffs.
Oh, yeah, definitely a primary target.
So why the EU specifically?
Well, for one, it's a huge trading bloc, right? A major economic force.
Right.
And they have a big trade surplus with the U.S., which was, one of the main reasons for these tariffs in the first place.
Right. So how bad is it for the EU?
Estimates suggest that up to 70% of EU exports to the U.S. could be impacted.
70%, that's huge.
It is.
So what kind of goods are we talking about here?
We're talking about major sectors of the EU economy. Automobiles, machinery, medical devices, chemicals. These are all key industries for them.
I mean, that's gotta hurt.
It does. The European Commission estimates that if these tariffs stay in place for a year, the cost to the EU could be between 100 and 150 billion euros.
100 to 150 billion.
That's a massive hit to their economy.
And on top of that?
And on top of that, Yanis Stornos, the governor of the Greek Central Bank, he warned that GDP across the Eurozone could drop by 0.5 to 1 percentage point. And that raises the possibility of some countries in the Eurozone going into recession.
So recession in parts of Europe, potentially, as a direct result of these tariffs.
It's a very real concern.
So what did the EU do? Did they try to talk this out?
Yeah, at first they went the diplomatic route, trying to avoid a trade war. They offered the U.S. a 0-for-0 tariff deal.
So no tariffs on either side?
Exactly. But the U.S. rejected that offer.
Okay, so diplomacy failed. What's next?
Retaliation. The EU announced they're going to put 25% tariffs on some key U.S. exports.
Like what kind of things?
Well, things like whiskey, motorcycles, tech goods, iconic American products.
So it's not just a potential trade war anymore.
No.
It's happening.
It's happening.
These retaliatory tariffs are supposed to kick in around May 16th, right?
That's the plan.
Okay, so this whole economic conflict, it's not just about trade figures.
Right.
We have to think about the war in Ukraine and how all of this impacts Europe's ability to support Ukraine.
Absolutely. The EU has really stepped up as the biggest financial backer of Ukraine.
Yeah, especially with all the
Gridlock in the U.S. Congress.
Yeah.
Europe has filled that gap, providing essential support.
And it's not small change, right?
No, not at all. This year alone, the EU has pledged over 50 billion euros in aid to Ukraine.
Wow, 50 billion.
That includes weapons, money for rebuilding, humanitarian aid, the whole package.
So that's a lot of money.
It is.
But with this economic slowdown looming and inflation rising, partly because of these tariffs, messing with supply chains and everything,
Right.
do they even have the money to keep supporting Ukraine at that level?
That's the big question. Their ability to provide aid is being squeezed.
So even if they still want to help, they might not be able to.
Right. And we're already seeing some cracks in the EU's unity on this issue.
Like what?
Well, some countries, especially in Southern Europe, they're
Yeah.
not so keen on giving more money. And even Germany, a key supporter of Ukraine.
Right.
There are whispers about maybe cutting back on their funding, citing energy costs and a slowdown in their industry.
So the EU support for Ukraine, it's not gone, but
But it's facing some serious financial headwinds.
yeah, and those headwinds are coming from these tariffs. That's the point, right?
It's a big factor.
So this is really complicated, but is anybody actually winning from these tariffs?
Well, in the short term, some sectors in the U.S. might see a boost. American manufacturers in industries like steel, metals, shipbuilding, they might benefit from less competition from imports.
Okay, so maybe more production in the U.S.
Potentially, yeah.
And maybe higher prices too, right?
That's possible, and defense contractors are another potential winner.
Right, because of the war in Ukraine.
Exactly. They're already doing well because of the demand for weapons and this push for American manufacturing.
This is America First 2.0 thing.
Yeah, that could really benefit them.
But some people say this is just going to make the military-industrial complex even richer, right?
That's a common criticism. The argument is that these tariffs will mostly help industries that are already politically connected,
Right.
and that the broader economy will suffer because of these protectionist policies.
Because at the end of the day, aren't these tariffs just another cost that gets passed on to American consumers and businesses?
That's generally how it works. Importers pay the tariffs up front, but those costs trickle down the supply chain. So businesses have to pay more for their materials,
Right.
and that means they have to raise prices for consumers.
So everything gets more expensive.
Exactly. And that reduces consumers' purchasing power and limits their choices. In the long run, it can slow down economic growth in the U.S.
So it's like a short-term sugar rush, but a long-term hangover.
That's one way to look at it.
So looking ahead, what are the big things we should be keeping an eye on? What are the unknowns here?
There are a lot of moving parts, but I'd say the biggest uncertainty is how the EU will retaliate.
Right.
Will their counter tariffs be strong enough to force the U.S. to change course?
Right.
Or will this just escalate into a full-blown trade war?
Right.
And then there's the whole question of whether Europe can keep supporting Ukraine with all this economic pressure.
Right.
And what about the global markets? Will they stay volatile, or will things settle down eventually? And maybe the biggest question of all, is this a sign of a bigger shift in the global landscape?
Right. Like, are we seeing a fundamental change in how countries interact with each other, economically and politically?
Exactly.
It feels like we're in a new era where economic policy is being used more aggressively as a tool of foreign policy.
You're absolutely right. This whole situation is a prime example of how intertwined economics and geopolitics really are.
So to sum it all up, these tariffs that President Trump announced back in April 2025, they've caused a major earthquake in the global economy.
Yeah.
And they could seriously undermine Europe's ability to keep funding Ukraine.
It's a complex situation with a lot of potential fallout.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our final thought for all of you listening out there. With all of this economic turmoil and the potential strain on international alliances, what do you think this means for the balance of power in the world? What other factors, besides economics, could influence how this all plays out? It's a lot to ponder, and we're going to keep digging into it. But for now, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Thanks, everyone.